Hi everyone, just thought I would give you a quick update now that I've actually had a full week of real classes. Um, you'll have to excuse me because I'm really tired, but that's my fault for staying up like 2 hours later than I'm used to because I've actually had a remarkably consistent circadian rhythm this whole past week, like out of necessity, and then I threw it off because it was Saturday. Um, First week went really well. Uh, I have four classes. The first is torts, and that relates to non-contractual losses. And these cases that we're reading, sort of plucking the law from those cases, are super interesting because they all have to do with, accidents and mishaps and trying to figure out if someone's liable, what kind of things will justify what would otherwise be negligent behavior, and just really interesting stuff because it gets to kind of the heart of American life. Like there's one case surrounding this guy who had a haystack too close to his neighbor's building. The haystack combusted, I think just because of the heat of like the sun or something. And and the guy's like, oh, I didn't, and it burned his neighbor's house down. And so the guy's like, I didn't know that a haystack would do that. And everyone else said, well, that's unreasonable. We all know that haystacks spontaneously combust. And the professor asked us, she's like, did you guys know that? And almost all of us are like, no. And so that goes to show that the standard for a reasonable person is what the community deems reasonable or common knowledge. And then there was another case that was about snowmobiles, and the professor's like, yeah, because I don't really know that much about snowmobiles. And I had a moment of, wait, you why? And then I realized I'm living in a desert now. Of course, they don't know about snowmobiles. So yeah, just little snippets of American life. Torts is really entertaining, and I think not that difficult so far. Another class is civil procedure, which is a lot more technical. It has to do with are you properly bringing a complaint? Are you properly responding to it? And honestly, doing mock trial in high school makes this way more fun because it makes it easier to kind of picture myself using these really technical rules to combat my opponent in any different part of the proceeding, any different part of the process. And the professor for that class is just really hilarious. And the I've heard multiple people describe him as one of those like inflatable blow up people who just waves their arms around. You know what I'm talking about, like for advertisements. He's like that. He's like that. So it's really entertaining. And then I have my lawyering process class, which is basically a legal writing and research class. And that's the only one where we as students are really producing information or producing assignments rather than just intaking stuff. And then there's not an exam for that class. Our grade comes from memos and briefs that we are going to write. And so that's just really practical. And everyone says that that's the class that really matters for getting a job. So no pressure there. Um, but so far, I think I like it. It's that one we're gonna have a lot more feedback that's direct, so that's a good sign because the other classes you don't get that much feedback unless you go hunt for it until the exam, and by that point it's kind of too late. So that I'm excited about that with this legal writing class. And then finally, I have contracts, and contracts is very different from the other two exam-oriented classes. It's different from civil procedure and torts, not so much because contract itself is so weird, but because the professor, her approach is it's not like the paper chase, but it's closer to the paper chase, where you have a professor who's asking these really complicated, difficult questions that the students really aren't equipped to answer, to try to draw us into this thinking process. And I'm enjoying it because she'll ask after explaining some concept or something, she'll say, okay, how does this justify from a public policy perspective? And usually, with a background in political science, I can come up with something that's like legitimate. But then she'll ask, okay, and then how is this justified from a contract theory perspective? And I'm like, I don't know contract theory. That's why I'm here. But she'll ask it anyway, so I have to try to think about it. And then, yeah, so that's I actually really, really like her approach because it's harder. Um, and she also allows students to raise their hands instead of just cold calling people, which I like raising my hand and I like contributing to class, so that's nice. But it's also difficult because I don't want to be a gunner, which is that person who raises their hand every time there's a question. And I've talked to several people who are like, am I a gunner? I don't even know. How do you know if you're a gunner or not? So it's this kind of fear that none of us want to be that guy, and it's hard to tell at this point if we are or not. So Hopefully I'm not. I'm trying to be aware of that. What else? So on Saturday, I met with my study group, which is 3 other people, so a group of 4, which really you don't want to go that much bigger than that, because then you wouldn't you don't have the chance to really engage and discuss stuff. Because there are just too many people, too many opinions. But right off the bat, it was immediately apparent that our group has a very extreme range of opinions on the political spectrum, on the moral spectrum, and like the religious side. Like all of it's just, we're all over the place, and it was very out in the open and very direct. And I was a little bit worried that maybe there would be too much tension, and at this point, like, no, I don't think so. There was actually one guy who openly is like, you know what, after talking to you more, to this other person where they disagree a lot, he's like, you know, I like you less, but I appreciate you more. And I hope that attitude is sustainable throughout the semester. If not, I don't know what's going to happen to our group. But for now, having all these different perspectives, you know, coming from people who are already seem to be, you know, fairly intelligent students, even by law school student standards, they all seem like they're, you know, they're contributing stuff. I think if we can just still be civil towards each other, it'll work out and actually be very powerful, because we'll have these different perspectives and different ways of thinking about things, which is what you need, because the way you're really graded on law school exams, and also a lot of our papers, is how many different opinions you can reasonably justify, because that's kind of what you do as a lawyer, is you take the set of facts and then you figure out how you can use it to best help your client. And if you can only come up with one interpretation from any given set of facts, you're not going to be a very good lawyer, which is why they say that we're good at lying. But I like to think of it as not lying, just being creative with conclusions. Anyway, so yeah, that's the study group life. That should be fun to see how that develops. Other than that, I've gone to the same church twice now, right across the street, which is super convenient. They have some small groups, which are like study groups of the Bible, kind of, that I haven't been able to go to yet, but I plan on doing that. Also, they have a softball team, and it's they're like, yeah, you know, it's our fall softball season starting up. And I had a moment of, who plays softball in the fall? And then I realized that here in the fall, it's still like 80 degrees, as opposed to where I'm from, where in the fall it's like 60 degrees. So that makes a lot more sense now. And that should be fun. I'll get to meet more people and do something physical. But yeah, so I've got some options there. Feeling pretty good, I guess, about both my academic and social lives so far. Also, I have a couch now, which you don't realize how important couches are until you don't have one. But now I do, and it's fantastic. Thanks, Mom and Dad and Grandma and Grandpa, for getting me this amazing couch. So yeah, that's my life. Nothing too terribly exciting. Like, thankfully, no blowouts on the freeway, nothing like that. Just yeah, settling into life here and meeting people, establishing routines. So that's me.